Hi, I'm Amy.
I'm Rachel.
And this is Wisen
Up.
Today we're talking about codependency. This is a very important topic that we would like to share with you today. It's something that has affected both of us in different ways, and we feel like a lot of people can relate, and it's something that we think that other people should be talking about as much as we talk about it, because it's just so important in your development through your relationship or things you might be going through. So today Rachel's going to share her story about how she came to this space of realizing that she's a codependent, and then I'm going to share my story. So that's how we're going to kind of do it today and have more of a dialogue of what we went through, just so that you can relate and maybe decide, is this something that I might have going on in my life? So I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Hi, thanks, Amy. So I didn't know what a codependent was, or what people would think a typical codependent is in an addiction relationship, because truly the codependent is kind of created and then they become addicted to the addict in a very different way. So for me, and in my experience, and a lot of other people can probably relate to this, if you were to say, what does a codependent look like? They look hostile and untrusting and controlling and manipulative, and they're plotting. They're always trying to catch the person in the lie that person is created. Relationships don't just start off like that. I mean, they might for some people if they come from a background where that's the norm. For me, that wasn't the norm. I just had a very, very difficult time over time putting 100% of my trust into something that my gut was telling me the entire time was a lie, or that was wrong, because that's something that the addict will do to try and create this codependent. It's not the addict's fault, it's your fault. It's everything else's fault except for the addict. And the codependent is crazy. They're ludicrous. The codependent kind of becomes a creature in a way. They're slowly pushed into being crazy and controlling and untrusting. And they're the reason why the other person drinks. And to be honest, it's a very lonely world, loving an addict to that capacity.
Totally
because
agree.
It's very lonely. Because I remember one day I looked at my partner and I said, do you know what the worst part is? Is that I know that if I were to keep my boundaries right now and tell you it's me or the booze, that you'd be gone. That needs to hit home. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you ask them, it's me or the booze or me or the drugs, and deep down inside, they're going to choose that over you, why are you staying? Do you think that it's miraculously going to get better one day, or you're going to be above it? Not probably while you're in that relationship.
I have a question though, before you keep going. If you thought that, did you ask the question then?
I did.
Because I feel like
times.
a lot of people wouldn't ask the question because they know the answer. And they don't want the answer.
The answer is not given. That's the evasion. That's the evader and the avoidance of an addict as well.
Yeah,
they're very, very good at manipulating the situation, so they give you half truths. They'll give you a sprinkle of a truth that's that, transparent dangling carrot. It's a little bit of truth here and a little bit of love there, and we're just going to blanket that and not really answer the questions. I'm not really going to get down to what the reality is, and the reality is it sounds like shit when a person looks at you dead in the face and says, I choose the booze over you, or I choose the drugs over you. That doesn't look good, right? Doesn't feel good, doesn't sound good to say. So you don't get an answer. What you get in that moment is attack and deflect, because the reality is they don't want to answer that question because they know it's true.
Do you feel like it's because they don't want to be accountable? I would think in my mind that's why they don't want to be accountable. So they're gonna attack and they're gonna deflect because they don't want to be accountable for the fact that they're affecting you this way.
And they don't want to stop what they're doing.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. Yes,
and
I agree with that.
it's easier to just point the finger, right?
I agree
So
with that.
Eventually over time, when a person continuously hears that they're crazy and they're ludicrous and they're making stuff up and they're trying to control them, or they're trying to catch them in the lie, which is all true. For me, it was all true. My codependency looked like marking the bottles, Like, how small can I make that little line? Or remember taking a picture of where things are, like maneuvering, like putting a little string someplace with a dilly dong hanging over here, and like if the dilly dong's that way.
Did you feel like a mad woman?
Absolutely. Yeah, you become a super sleuth. That's what they do to you. They create a super sleuth and then go, why don't you trust me? Really? And so that's, after a while, if you love that person, you do start to feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah,
you do start to feel like maybe it is me. Maybe they're not that bad. You know, you'll try and justify, well, you know, the kids don't seem to mind as much, or, you know, they're maneuvering all right. You'll try and downplay it in order to just justify the behavior, because you will genuinely think, I'm losing my mind, because the reality is you have zero control over your environment at any point in time. So the codependent learns to try and control everything. And what does that look like for the addict? They're trying to control me. They're trying to tell me what to do. They're complaining. They're always nagging. They're on my back. That's not something I feel like the codependent wants to do. We don't want to be a mother or a father. We don't want to, father anybody, a father, mother. We want to be in a relationship where there doesn't feel like there's this hierarchy, but it starts to become created, and there's where the snowball and spiral just continues to go. It just continues to fuel more anger and more fear and anxiety. And then I think that the codependent becomes addicted to the addict. There's a fine line between being madly in love with somebody and then being addicted to trying to fix the situation, or being addicted to, I put in this much time for this long to try and make this work. I quit drinking completely years before they did. I thought, because that was another thing, if you can't beat them, join them, or if they are not going to change, how can I expect them to change if I don't change, right? And even though my drinking didn't cause as many issues and it wasn't as severe, I was still drinking with them. So when I stopped, what I thought in my brain was going to happen didn't. The reverse happened. I thought that if I stop drinking, it'll help them get sober and see themselves.
Same.
No, what happened was they actually became a little bit more resentful because I wasn't drinking along with them. Now it's all on them, right? So before it was the both of us. Before, how can you say anything? He lost his drinking buddy, essentially, right? So I'm trying to do this good thing. They lose their drinking buddy, and now the relationship really starts to pull apart, because not only... So now the codependent at that point in time has to look at it with cleaner eyes, right? The goggles are off at that point. And the addict over here is still doing the same exact things. Deflecting, bulldozing, gaslighting, lying, hiding, all that stuff.
Right.
And that's the part of the relationship, I think, that creates the most distrust.
Is that when you started healing at that point, where you started going, okay, these are all the things that he said is wrong with me, and he keeps saying them even though I'm not drinking anymore? Is that when you started to go, I'm really going to work on myself now?
That is the point where I worked on myself a lot more.
Is that when you started to see, oh my gosh, I'm actually, and then you picked up the books and you started going, oh my gosh, this is why this is happening.
This is happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this huge, like, oh shit, this is what I've created. This is what I've turned into. And the reality is that all the things that he was saying about me were true. I had a high anxiety level. I lived in this high level of stress all the time. Checking the back of the truck, looking in hiding places. Like I said, trying to be a super sleuth. It makes you want to check the phone. Where are they? Follow where. You just become obsessed with trying to catch the person in the act so that you can point the finger at them and go, see.
I'm not crazy.
I'm not crazy. You did it. You're lying. You did this to me. To himself, to herself, to themselves, right?
Right.
But that's the whole point. It's trying to catch the person in the act so that you can become validated that you're not going insane. They don't like to hear that either, though. Right? Because as soon as you do catch them, I didn't try and hide that. If I wanted to hide it, if I wanted to hide it, you wouldn't have found it. okay, in between, rock and a hard place, right?
Except for all the drinks he stopped and got on the way home that you never found out about.
There's that too. My dad, when he became an alcoholic, again, later on in my life, he had a glass, I'll never forget, he had a glass of vodka under his bed, full of ice, and all the way up to the top. And my brother walked in and was like, hey, Dad, you drinking already? It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. He's like, no, that's my water. My brother's like, well, those ice cubes lasted all night long because it's been there since last night. Like, the stories that they'll tell to try and just pull the wool over your eyes and see if you'll believe it. Eventually, you do start to just believe maybe it's not that bad. And there's where it becomes scary for the codependent. And there's where you have to separate yourself from that situation. And for me, depending on the type of person you're with, it was a Jekyll and Hyde situation for me, right? So I loved the Jekyll and loathed the Hyde with calypso force, I had to separate those two people in order to continue to stay. Because if I put them as one person, which they are, one person, but if I kept them as one person, I felt foolish to stay. I'm the fool, I'm the idiot, and this is my fault, right? It wasn't until I connected that this person and this person are the same frickin' person that I started that healing process, where I recognized I have to love them wholly or not at all at this point in time. So it was a choice to back away on both sides in that situation. It was during that time where my healing process began, and then I realized this wasn't my fault. I didn't cause it. I didn't create it. It's been there long before I ever came around, and it's not my demon to fight anymore. I can't fight your battles for you with you anymore.
That's good.
And until you break down to the point where you see them for who they are in toto, and that you are not responsible for battling their demons for them. That's not your responsibility. And you didn't sign up for it. And I remember in the beginning, they looked at me and told me, this isn't going to be an easier road. And I was like, I love you. And I did. I was like, you know what? Boy, I can handle a lot. I had no idea just how much I could handle. Boy, you showed me just how strong I could be. And for that, I'm very grateful. And I'm grateful for all the lessons that I learned through it. But when trust is broken in the relationship, that's the foundation. Those are the building blocks of any relationship. And lies, actions, and words not lining up, that lack of integrity, promises that aren't kept, words that fall on deaf ears, all those things just wreck the foundation of any trusting relationship, and it's very, very hard to gain that back. So I feel like when you are going through a process of recovery from recognizing that you deserve better, you can survive and thrive without that person. Life will be better when this amount of stress isn't in your life anymore, because unfortunately, the addicts and other people, they create these whirlwinds, these cyclones and silos of drama all over their life, wherever they go.
It's like that show, Little Fires Everywhere.
It's little fires everywhere, like bing, 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 little fire, 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 everywhere. It's just the nature of the beast.
Of the addict.
It's the nature of the addict. And so, that's a very, very hard thing to heal from. And you're either going to heal with the person if they're going to decide to get healthy, or you're going to heal without them, which is what we are going to talk about in the third podcast. But I want to talk about how trust is rebuilt, if it can be rebuilt. There are very specific steps in how trust is rebuilt in a relationship when the codependent is now recognizing they can't be in that relationship anymore. And there's only one way that you get out of a relationship with an addict when you're a codependent, and that is figure out what your boundaries are and stick to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, dig those heels in and stick to your boundaries. And every time they try and wiggle their way in or make you feel bad or try and blame, you just keep sticking to your boundaries. You stick to your boundaries so much that they actually now believe it for the first time, because you haven't stuck to any of the boundaries the entire time you've been there, because you didn't want to lose the person for whatever the reason is. You know, and there's myriad reasons why somebody would stay.
And damn, boundaries are so challenging.
Boundaries are the hardest. They are the very, very hardest thing for any human to stand up for themselves. I don't deserve this. This is my line in the sand. Because the boundaries are like morals. They can be real bendy, right?
That is a very true statement, Rachel. Very true statement.
So, are your boundaries bendy? Do you have bendy boundaries? Do you have bendy boundaries? This whole point is to take, the codependent needs to see their own red flags. You are a walking red flag. You just don't see it because you're trying to fix it, and then you're going crazy at the same time.
Well, I also feel like the codependent starts to think that they're innocent in all these things when really they've been choosing.
They do play a victim role.
A lot. And I always say there has to be a payoff for you to stay.
Sure.
And I think being the victim and not having to be accountable for why you're there and why you're doing that because it's not your fault is a lot of the time the payoff, which seems kind of crazy, but I've done it, and I've seen a lot of other people do it.
Yeah.
You know? I think that it's really important for when you are identifying the fact that you're a codependent and is acknowledging that you are there for a reason, even if the reasons are toxic.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we all have a derivative, you know, and our derivatives, a lot of the times if we're choosing a toxic situation, it's because our derivative is toxic.
Yeah. Once you're working through the process of, once you recognize that this is really what's happening, and then you set those boundaries and you stick to them, the likelihood is the person's going to walk. And so that suffering and that pain, all those things that you tried to avoid because it's painful and it sucks and you know, emotions are hard and being sad isn't fun and all the things that you didn't want to go through, you have to accept that you're going to go through it, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to break you down, and it's going to show you what you're made out of. But the moment that person starts to build and they get stronger and stronger and realize that they can do this without that person, that they can find solace and peace, and most of all, forgiveness. You were talking, you know, Amy was talking about forgiveness. I blame myself for everything that I allowed myself to go through and what I created along with it. Because again, the creature is created along with the other creature, and now you've got two creatures just roaming around causing havoc, ping, 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 little fires everywhere, and then everything around just falls apart. You have to walk away from that.
Well, and the forgiveness that I was talking about is forgiving yourself.
Yeah. Forgiving
yourself for becoming this monster and not even seeing it happening, or you know, in your case, anyways.
I felt like I had to forgive myself for the pain I allowed myself to go through when I could have walked away at any point. I could have made it a lot easier for myself. I wouldn't be the person I am today if I did that. I wouldn't be as strong as I am, and I wouldn't have recognized a lot of things about my character that I didn't like, that were unsavory pieces of myself. Because, you know, when you love somebody and you've got that twin flame relationship, they are that mirror in front of you. They're showing you what you don't like about yourself, right?
I agree.
So that's there as well, and you've got to really love somebody to be able to kind of work through that. But yeah, no, I had to forgive myself for allowing myself to be put through the pain that I helped create and that was being created. Come to a place of forgiveness that this is a disease. This is a disease, and it's a very, very acceptable disease in the world that we live in, and it causes a lot of havoc and a lot of pain for many, many people. So forgiving that person, because it isn't a situation where they know not what they do. They're fully aware of exactly what they're doing. It's forgiving the fact that, you know, they can't help it to a high degree. It's like in the book, Codependent No More, the author talks about, it's like telling somebody who has pneumonia, not to cough.
That's a great example.
And that's what it feels like for them. So understanding that a lot of the pain isn't intentional, and that was something that I heard a lot. I didn't mean it. I didn't do it on purpose. Yes, you did do it on purpose.
You did not do it.
You did not do it on purpose.
Right.
Just because there's not malice behind it doesn't mean that the action didn't have the same, or if not a worse effect. Because at least if you did it out of malice, then I can say, well, you're just an ass, you're a jerk. But if you didn't know that this is the pain that you're causing, we have a serious problem. Now, see?
That part.
So forgiving myself and then learning how to build back that trust, and then what it looks like getting through to the other side. I was very fortunate in my situation where after we did walk away for many, many, many months, they decided this is something they wanted to do for their life, was to get clean, well, not clean, but to get sober and live a different healthy life. I allowed that back into my life as well. And let me tell you, we're going to talk about this in the third podcast, that the codependent's out for blood for a minute, not just a day or two or a month or 3. It takes years of trust building, years of actions and words lining up, years of...
So what do you think that looks like in real time? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm curious. Like, what do you think that looks like in real time? Like, if you are with this person and some of their old behavior comes up, is that what you're talking about? Is like
that's a piece of it.
The codependent isn't just gonna take that you're sober, right? Like, they're gonna go, I expect you to make amends with me. I want you, like, how I always say, remorse doesn't have a shelf life.
Right. That's a big thing. And that's what you want to know. You want to feel their remorse. You want to know that they're sorry for the pain that they've caused you. You want to know that they'll grovel. Like, you want them to eat crow for a while.
Right. How long do you think someone should be sorry for their actions?
Until the other person feels safe again.
So, and I think till the end.
Who knows?
If you bring it up 10 years later and you have emotion about it, I think that they should meet you where you're at. Honestly. Not because you're trying to beat a dead horse to death, but because if you had remorse 10 years ago, that remorse should still live in you today.
I haven't seen that. I haven't even been around long enough to see it. I didn't see it with my father, and I wouldn't know. I'll hope that it would be, but
maybe I'm holding
that's a
to
tough
some like really high thing, but I also, that's who I am. Right. So if I'm sorry forever. If I hurt your feelings when we were 20, trust and believe, I still feel bad about it if it comes up.
Yeah.
I'd be like, dude, I hate that. I hate this story because it makes me feel bad because I was such a jerk. You know what I mean? Because my remorse doesn't go away.
I think that's really hard for the addict too, right? This getting sober and clean is a really hard thing to do. That should be enough, right? I see that a lot. It's like, haven't I showed you, hasn't it been long enough? No, it hasn't been long enough. It's been 3 months. It hasn't been long enough. I'm sorry.
This was just yesterday for me. Yeah.
And quite literally, just yesterday for us feels like eons to them.
Which is...
Because they're going through something very physically hard, very mentally hard. They're fighting urges all the time.
I feel that.
And when you're in a situation where you're like on lockdown, everything's like this for a long period of time, and you have to learn who you are, especially if you've been drinking your whole life.
That's a great perspective.
And you don't even know who you are, and you're learning who that person is. It feels like forever.
And then you're still wrong, and you're still wrong, and
Right.
you're still wrong, and you're fighting. Most addicts, the whole reason why they're addicts is because they feel wrong all the time.
So yeah, and now they're still wrong. They're still wrong, but so codependence, out for blood.
For sure.
That's going to be, the last part of
Absolutely.
it is figuring out when that point comes where both parties then feel safe enough to begin to heal and find that love again that existed, except now it gets a brand new opportunity to really exist on a whole nother level of just communication. You learn how to communicate with the person in a completely different way. And we'll talk about that as well. So that was my experience with kind of the codependency that I started to see coming about. And it took years to see it. And it's taken years at this point.
Yeah, no offense, but she wasn't hearing it.
No.
She wasn't.
I wasn't.
She wasn't in the space where feelings aren't facts yet.
Feelings are facts.
They're an indicator, not a dictator.
Yeah.
Unless
so-
you're us. And then
I really was. And here's the thing. I knew it. I just didn't want to hear it.
No.
But I knew it.
I feel the hell out of that.
Like,
yes.
I knew it. I don't need to hear it. Because if I need to hear it, means that I am going to lose this person. And again, that hurts more.
That's
right?
a fantastic perspective too. Part of why you're in denial is because you don't want to have the conversation of,
Right.
I'm not going to be with this person, because if I actually admit that this is going on, then I have to admit that something has to be done.
Bendy boundaries.
Right.
Bendy boundaries.
Well, at that point, there wasn't boundaries, because
Right.
every time you thought you were setting a boundary, they were doing whatever they wanted anyways. There was no boundaries.
There was no, again, the loss of control. It's a lot emotionally to take on. If you are in this situation and you feel that my stories align with you, you have to walk away. Walk away. Gotta walk away. And you have to figure out what you're made out of and then build yourself back up again. Now, whether or not they go through a program or get sober or not, it's not your problem, right? It's not your responsibility.
Even though you feel responsible.
Even though you feel responsible.
For sure.
You know, if it's a situation where you're done, then the recovery is probably going to be a smoother transition than if they come back into your life again. Because if they come back, now what are you dealing with? Now how do you repair that relationship? So that's my experience. Amy has a very different experience with
For sure.
what codependency is, and a lot of other people do. So I want to, have Amy talk about what her experience looked like.
So my experience with being a codependent is I grew up in an alcoholic, drug addict home, and then my dad got sober when I was 9. So I dealt with my mom going to Al-Anon and learning to set her boundaries, where what that looks like in real time is she stopped making doctor's appointments for my dad and stopped doing things for him that he would do for himself. So she learned how to kind of separate herself from my dad in a way that she learned how to be different with him, where she's like, oh, well, you're like, my mom would literally like buy my dad a bottle of alcohol so that he wouldn't go to the store. So
Because if he went to the store, he'd probably buy more.
Or he would get in trouble. Like my dad, he at one time he got drunk and he came home and he, like, across the street from our house, stepped off of a curb and ripped all the tendons in his knee and had to have staples and all this stuff, and he didn't even know until he got sober like a week later. So my mom was like, okay, I'm just gonna buy the alcohol for him. So I grew up with my mom being a codependent.
Oh, that's the other opposite side. Let's placate the situation. Let's make it better by enabling it. I remember one time, my partner was in a situation where they shouldn't have been in that situation, and their response to me was, well, why didn't you just take care of me then? Oh, they wanted me to take care of them in the stupor, because that would have been a good girlfriend.
Right.
That's what I would have been a good. Oh, I left, because that's what a bad girlfriend does.
See, I'll be 100% honest. I might not have left, because if something happened to him, I would forever feel responsible, because that's the kind of codependent I am.
And I was angry.
So I'm going to fast forward to my first marriage. I met my husband at a bar, and he was the first person I met at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the first red flag of the day. And the first time I kissed him, he had already had the alcoholic rot gut. Where like his breath didn't smell that good. And I'm over here like, there's something about him that's drawing me to him, even though all the red flags are going off. Now, side story, I lost my dad a year before. So I have a feeling that had a lot to do with why I was in this broken place, that I would accept somebody like this for myself.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with one of my friends, telling her I would never be with him. And then I ended up 8 months into our relationship getting pregnant, and I was drinking all day, every day at that point. I was crossing into alcoholism at that point. And when I got pregnant, I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I stopped doing everything, but he continued to do what he was doing. So my relationship with him was on and off for years. I had 3 children with him. I knew that I was in a toxic relationship, but I was young, so I didn't really know exactly how bad it really was until later. One of the things I could talk about in that relationship was I wasn't like Rachael. I didn't measure bottles. I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't hunt him down at the bar. I didn't check his pockets. I didn't do any
I'm in
of
the
those
back
things.
with binoculars like this down the block,
Right.
just zooming in.
No, and looking back, I probably could have done that. And I remember in the relationship deciding that like, if I had to do that, then I'm in the wrong relationship, right?
Yeah.
So that's the decision I made.
That's a good one.
So the other side of that coin is that I didn't look into behavior deeper because I didn't want to know the things that I wasn't seeing, right? Because I made this choice to marry this man and I had kids with him, and like, I didn't want the failure of my marriage. So there were so many things that I didn't want to, I was a coward. I didn't want to face that I accepted this bullshit for my life and this man that I could never hold accountable. And I remember getting sober for him too. And I didn't drink for like 2 years. And I remember
it made no difference.
No, I remember.
Not
No,
to him.
this is what he said to me. We had a dialogue, and I was like, I stopped drinking to support you and not drinking. And he was all, that was stupid. And I was like,
right.
what? Like, I'm over here like, are you serious? And he's like, well, nobody ever asked you to do that. And I was like, well, I was telling you that I didn't want you to drink. So I felt like if I didn't drink, that would support you and not drinking.
So
He's
then
all,
he lost
and
his drinking buddy?
I wasn't his drinking buddy.
That's true.
Maybe until I got pregnant, I was. And then after that, even when after I had my daughter, back to kind of towards the beginning, she was like, I don't know, 6 to 8 months old. And he came home one night drunk from going out with his cousin. And he tells me, I don't think we should be together and I'm going to leave you. And he tried to leave me. And I was like, what? We have a baby. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I couldn't wrap my mind around what he was talking about. And he's like, I'm fucked up. And I'm gonna cause you pain. And like, I'm never gonna change type shit. And I was like, everybody can change. I didn't understand because I was so young and so naive and I believed in people so much at that time in my life that I didn't understand.
And I think that's important for people who are watching this right now, who are in a relationship like this and they're in their early 20s.
You're naive.
You're naive.
I believed in everybody. My dad got sober when I was 9. So
and my dad got sober when I was 3. So it's possible.
Right. So I believed in him. But the thing is that that's not what he wanted. He didn't want to be sober. He grew up in a really hard life and he had a lot of pain and a lot of trauma and he was going to drink until he died, and he did.
So at that point in time, what did your codependency start to manifest itself into?
I had dreams every night that he was cheating on me and hurting, like messing me up, and I ignored it all.
You had deep gut intuition.
Yeah,
that's something that is,
and
you know when they're lying, when it's wrong, you can feel it, you can smell it, it's there, and all the while, the evader.
So the first couple years, I did try to set boundaries, but once his parents died, like once his dad died, remember in the beginning his dad died, that one thing separated us and we never came back really. Like it just got worse and worse and worse. And it's about, like I said, I wasn't the one who checked the bottles. He would go to the bar. I wouldn't want him to go to the bar. And he would do things like start arguments with me when I wasn't even trying to talk or have an argument so that he could leave and go to the bar without being like,
that's part of the manipulation.
And that was, that's
calculated.
And I allowed it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, he'd get in an argument, I'm leaving, I'm going to the bar. And I'm like, that's what you wanted to do anyways. Like, why didn't you just say you wanted to go? Why did you have to start an argument with me? But I didn't realize that until like years later. That he was purposely starting arguments with me.
So that's another thing, like when you're in a codependent relationship and that's part of that sabotage, that manipulation. If you are young and you do see these signs of the person creating scenarios to get what they want, whatever way that is.
For sure.
Then...
Oh, he was always going to do what he wanted anyways. But it was easier for him to not deal with me if he put it in a way, he did it in a way that manipulated me so he could go do what he wanted anyways because I'm the problem.
So at what point in time then did you decide this isn't going to work? Because I talked about how I had to separate the two people that I had, the Jekyll and the Hyde, and I had to make them one person to get over it. In your situation, he was very honest about who he was, what he was about, and what he was not willing to do. At what point in time, because your codependency was quiet, You know, like you said, you didn't hunt him down. You placated the situation a lot of the time. You did your, wifely duties. A lot of people come from families where, they have a strong Christian background, or not even Christian. It could be any culture where you don't get divorced. And I come from one of those cultures where you don't get divorced. It's just not something that you do. And
interestingly enough, I didn't come from that kind of a culture, but I still was like that.
There are a lot of people who feel that way.
Where I was like, well, to me, it was about failing.
Or failing. You stay because you don't want to fail. You've put in that much time and that much effort. At what point in time?
Well, and I believed in him for so long. And then it was like, and then I felt okay, so I'm a strong woman. So if you have this strong woman identity, and then you're being treated like this by someone, it's like you compartmentalize the strong woman away from the part of you that's being weak and allowing yourself to be treated this way.
True.
And that's something that I struggled with, is that I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that I was being brainwashed slowly by this person to not speak up for myself and to not fight back or push back.
Because if you fought back or pushed back, at least for me, it was a complete slam down.
For sure, yes.
Complete gaslighting.
Well, and it became, so it was like this. And I feel like this is something I'm so glad I thought of this. When you're talking to your person and all of a sudden they never brought any of these things up before, but now they're bringing up all the things about you, that's a huge problem, right? And the reason why that's a problem is because they've had ample opportunity throughout the relationship to confront you about the things that they're unhappy about in the relationship. But the only time they bring it up is when you want to discuss the things that are hurting you and that you're unhappy with. And with my first marriage, it was like that. And honestly, in my second marriage, I went through the same thing with him, but he's sober. So that's something I'm going to touch more on in the next podcast, because we're going to talk about what you do when your partner is sober. It was so frustrating because every time I tried to talk to him, he would always deflect back to me all the things that I could be better at and I could be doing at. But when you get to the point where you fixed all the things they're complaining about, and they still can't be accountable, that's when you start to wake up and go, no matter what conversation I'm trying to have, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And that was a real eye-opener for me. And what's crazy is that I went out and found that in my next marriage with a sober person, where he was a dry drunk, where he wasn't doing his program and he wasn't in recovery, and he was doing the same exact narcissistic behavior, turning it around on me, never actually saying how he feels until I'm saying how I feel, which to me, if you bring up something about me when I'm telling you something that I need to, that's hurting me, I don't want to hear it. Because I already did that in my first marriage, where I was brainwashed and pushed down and treated like crap to the point. So when I finally left that marriage for good, I had left him multiple times. When I finally left that first marriage for good, I woke up one morning and I went into the bathroom. I peed, and then I
did my duties.
I did my stuff. And then I look in the mirror and I'm like, washing my hands, and I look up and I did not recognize myself. Like, I didn't know who I was anymore. It's actually making me feel emotional about talking about it, because it kind of puts me into that space where I'm like, I looked at myself and I was empty in my eyes. And I'm a really alive, loving,
vibrant gal.
Yeah. And I'm like standing in the mirror and I'm gone.
You're a shell. You become a shell of a human being.
That's the words I was looking for. I was a shell of a human being. And I remember seeing how vacant and dead I was. And that moment is when I decided I was done.
Right when you feel that they've taken everything that they could.
There was nothing left.
When there's nothing left.
Well, because that was 6 months after his mom died, years later. And after his mom died, he again blamed me, right? Like, I can control the universe and control his parents, being on drugs and alcohol and dying. Like, that they were like that before I ever came around. But for some reason, me being there, it was my fault. So when I had already gone through that with his dad. So I saw the writing on the wall, and I was like,
those red flags.
Yeah. I mean, it was more than a red flag. It was, I've done this shit before, and this is going to be way worse because now they're all gone.
Yeah.
And I'm it. I'm the only one. And he doesn't love me like that. He doesn't respect me like that. And I realized he didn't like me. And I saw it. And I realized it and was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I had 3 babies when I left him. I had an 11-month-old, a 2-year-old, and an almost 5-year-old when I left him. I was all alone, and I left. And I had left him at least 4 times before that. But this particular time, I knew that I was about to go down a road of hell, because at that point, he didn't think he had to answer to me about anything. And I found out 2.5 years later, after we broke up, that he had been cheating on me most of our marriage.
Yeah. That was a shock.
Yeah. After the first time I left him, he had me come back, but he cheated on me at that point. So when I had my 3rd son, he was cheating on me during that time. And there were signs and there were things going on that I should have known, and I didn't. Now, I smoked a lot of marijuana during that time. I'm just going to let you know, I would go on and off from it, but there was times where I was smoking a lot of marijuana. It was literally the way that I coped with life, and I did that for a long time, off and on. Because I didn't know how to regulate my emotions around those things. And because I was always told that I was a lot, I was always trying to not be a lot.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest detriment that I ever did to myself. That's part of what made me a codependent, was trying not to be a lot and trying not to be loud and in his face and telling him, no, I'm not doing this, and leaving and getting away from him, and I should have. And he was horrible. He was horrible. And then, just a tad bit more about my experience with codependency is just that I needed to heal what brought me to that space where I accepted that for myself. So when I left him, I checked myself into an outpatient program for drug and alcohol abuse. And I got counseling for myself and for my children. And then I studied to be a drug and alcohol counselor. But I learned so much in that time about myself and healing and growing. And then pretty much since then, healing and growing has been a mission for me, so that I don't ever go through something like that again.
And he passed away.
Yes.
It wasn't long.
I was separated from him for over 5 years. And he was pretty much, for the most part, an absent parent during all that time. I still was a codependent even after I left. And all the years, I think this is important to say too, all the years that I wasn't with him, I had never healed from feeling responsible for him. So he also threatened me to, like, if anything happened to my kids, he would kill me, things like that. So I spent that whole over 5 years afraid of him,
living
still
in fear.
Yeah. So even though he was absent during that time, he was
right here.
And that's why I say he brainwashed me, is because he was in here. So even though I was living a whole life, raising my kids by myself, and he wasn't a part of it, I was still worried about him and what he thought and how he felt and what he was going to do and in my head. And
I did the same thing.
And I would cry for him. I was so deeply affected by all of it so much.
You were addicted to the addict.
I was addicted to the addict. And when I look back, I loved him very, very much. I did.
You did.
But now that I've actually been in a relationship where the love is reciprocated, I realized that I was addicted to the addict. And I was addicted to being the codependent. Because you have to think, I didn't feel worthy of that love. So there was a payoff for me. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is that even when you're not choosing, you're choosing. And for me, I learned that lesson because I was the codependent that didn't mark the bottles and that didn't call him or go to the bar and check on him, right? So when I got away from him, one of the things I had to realize is that that happened in my life because I was choosing to have a blind eye to that, turn my head to the truth about it. And part of my healing was taking responsibility for the part that I played in that happening to me. And that yes, it was his fault for the things that he did, but it wasn't his fault that I chose to keep coming back for that. Right? And so in that space, I want to share this with people because that's where I got most of my healing from.
The forgiving yourself part.
It's the forgiving myself. And part of forgiving yourself is being accountable that you have the power to not do that again. Right? That part of why you were there, mainly why you were there, is because you chose it. Whether you were brainwashed or whatever, and you chose to for me, I chose to turn a blind eye to his bullshit, where you chose to be the crazy person, right? I was just as crazy as you, but I was quietly crazy, right? It's the same thing. We did the same thing. Just the way we acted about it was different, right? But we both denied ourselves the love that we deserve. We both denied ourselves living in a space of truth and showing ourselves that we're worthy of more and better. We both, ultimately, it's still the same thing. And I think that's why it was so important for us to share our stories, is because we want other women or men too, because men go through this as well, to understand that like the root of all of that is that you're not honoring yourself and finding yourself worthy of real love and real compassion and somebody who really wants to hear you. And if they hurt you, when you go to them and say, hey, that hurt me, that they go, I didn't know, like, I didn't mean to hurt you. Like, let's talk about that. That's real love. That's real communication. And the codependent relationship is always the perpetrator and the victim.
Yeah.
So,
and then also, I just want to touch on that because I know we have to wrap up soon.
I was just thinking the same thing.
We do. What that looks like when the addict has children. What type of codependent are you creating with your kid?
Absolutely.
Because I've seen it where our exact parallel codependency stories I have seen with the same parent and two of their children. One person did what I did, the other person did what you did. Quiet versus verbal. The loud ones make a point. We make a real big point. We also really upset the situation a lot more.
Well, and you also, when
really
you, and the outside looking in too, everybody thinks you're crazy because the addict isn't showing everybody what they're doing, that you're over here snapping all the time.
Right.
You're losing, or you're out for dinner and you're like crying and freaking out and everybody's looking, but they don't know that your partner just said the coldest shit ever.
Right.
You're reacting to the way that you're being treated, and there's never a resolution.
I always felt that if I kept my mouth shut, if that was why I didn't. If I start to be small, it'll never get any better. If I learn to keep my mouth shut and just placate the situation and just, shove it under the rug, if I learn how to do that, I have no boundaries at all. I've thought to myself, I'll never get out from underneath that if I start to become quiet and my voice becomes stifled and all the things that I need to change just become, an idea.
It happens over time. I wasn't quiet at first. Over time, it was like getting mentally and emotionally beaten down.
Yeah, I wasn't quiet for 8 years.
Until I looked in the mirror and was like, I don't even know you. People, they automatically have that energy of respect for me because I walk that way. I have that demanding of respect in my energy because of who I am and how I feel about myself. But during that time, I lost that. And so seeing myself in the mirror and going, who are you? Like, you're just a beaten down dumb bitch. Like, that's how I saw myself. Like, I was a dumb bitch. I just let this person run.
And I felt the same way. We just, again, the outcome and the repercussions of it all, it all looks the same in the mirror
For sure.
At the end, right? How you go about it can be very, very different. And the healing process is different for everybody, but we're going to talk about that in the third podcast.
And that's where we're going to go into the codependent out for blood, is because they don't want that remorse to have a shelf life. They want to be able to have those feelings until they're healed. So I'm actually really excited about that part because I'm all about the healing. So telling the sob story and the hard stuff, that's like, I'm here for all of it, of course, but I liked going into this space of, okay, so this happened, now what?
Right, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So those are our stories.
I really hope that, Rachel and I both, we hope that us sharing our stories helps you or gives you something to think about. Right. So please come and stick around for the next podcast, because that one's going to get pretty good too, because that's where we actually talk about what it looks like in real time to start healing from this and moving past the pain.
And that's a maintenance. That's the hardest part.
Healing is until you die. So if you ever get anything from these podcasts, healing is till you die. When you stop healing and growing and changing and transforming and moving forward, then you become stagnant, and all those behaviors start to come back. You start to accept that kind of stuff for yourself, or you start doing it to yourself.
Yeah, no backsliding.
It's acknowledging and recognizing yourself, like you said, seeing your own red flags, seeing when you start to do that and recognizing it, because that's kind of part of life, right? We always when we're trying on a new hat, we always want to go back to the old comfortable hat to try it on again and be like, oh, but I'm not that person anymore. And then that's how you go into the next space.
You got to break in the new hat.
Yeah, you do. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, just like a shitty pair of shoes too. Like they're beautiful. They're beautiful, but then they're hurting. But if you wear them for a while and make them fit your feet, then they're comfortable.
You got to dig the heels in.
And then you're strutting. You're like, okay, we're gonna end now. But we're just so excited for the next one. So please stick around. Again, I'm Rachel.
I'm Amy. And this
is Wisen Up.
Thanks for watching, guys.